Hi guys, welcome back. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about something different. Like usually, we talk about quarterly result updates or we talk about, con calls, right? But today's video is a bit personal. We are going to be talking about the stock, and what made me buy that stock, my journey with that stock, basically, what made me buy the stock, what made me sell the stock, and what has been my journey in between, throughout that holding period. So that is what we're going to be talking about today, and I will take a live example only, otherwise I will not be able to drive home the points, right? That is another thing. The so if you're coming here and watching the video only for a stock name, I would say, completely like shut the video right now, because it wouldn't add any value. But if you want to understand, what is the psyche behind, like holding, buying, and selling the stock, I mean, I would say this is the right video for you, just explaining my journey over here. And one of the reasons that I'm doing this video, actually I had asked, I believe in this is Q3, right? Q3 may only I had asked this, and many of you told you would like to know. That's also one of the reason. And the other reason is because from my experience, right? Like when through the times I've been on Twitter, or when I was, when I'm in this phase of investing, I've never seen anybody, share their stories. Like I've only heard, whenever that stock, reaches the top, I've only heard people tell, okay, like this is their 10x, this is their 5x, and so forth. But nobody talks about few things such as their losses, like because not every decision that you do, not every decision that you go on to, like you purchase a stock, it's going to be like a multi-bagger, right? That's not going to happen. And even let's say you do find a multi-bagger, that entire process, like what has been the psyche, because every single time after you buy till the point you sell, there is going to be so many times where the doubt is going to creep up on you, and you have so many doubts, right? Like for example, like, oh, is this the top, should I sell it, it's already been a 3x, shayad abhi bech do, yeah, like is it too expensive, the valuation is too expensive, should I add, all of these things I believe are the most critical points, during that journey, where it determines whether it becomes a multi-bagger or not. And I think the point of doing this video is to share that, what has been that psychology, or what has been my mindset during that entire holding period, right? And I will try to address this video, because I wouldn't have been able to make this. Like, by the way, the stock that we're going to be talking about is Tinna Rubber and Infrastructure. It's been an almost 5x for me, like in that range, or a 4x, you can tell. And then what was the psyche behind holding this thing, what are the doubts that creep, what are the biases that I faced. This entire video I'll divide it into three categories. One is the buying decision, the selling decision, the third one, and in the middle will be the holding decision. And during this holding decision, what are the biases that I faced, because in my journey, the mistakes that I've made in the past, right, I've learned from that mistakes, I've not made that mistakes right now during Tinna Rubber. And that is exactly how, like it I believe it, I was able to, every time that bias came in, I was like, okay, I did this, I shouldn't be doing that. I think that is the reason I've been, I was able to play this game really well. Okay, so the first thing over here, first thing first, right? Like, how did I get to know about Tinna Rubber and Infrastructure? Like, how did I get to know about this stock? So when I first got to know about this, it was, I believe, in Q4, in Q4 of like, the FY 22-23 year. In that time, that Q4, I had got to know. And there I have a friend of mine called Nishat, right? So I have a couple of friends through whom we, like, we bounce off ideas whenever I get an opportunity. I inform my friends and vice versa, like we keep bouncing ideas off each other. And when Nishat came, and he's like, bro, could you like read about this and like let me know what your opinion is? Okay. And at that time I was like, oh, Tinna Rubber and Infrastructure. And then I just saw, I had never tracked the company before this, by the way. Like, it was the first time I was hearing about the company. Okay. And I just like read about it on screener. You get that thing on the right side, right? Like, about the company. I read about it. When I just saw like the first few lines about tire, and I was like, screw this shit, like I'm not doing it. One of the reason why I was like that is, because when I started my investing journey, like when I tell investing matlab, when I started reading properly, like reading the con call, reading the PPT and everything, right, that part of the journey, I started with the auto ancillary space. Okay. And a part of auto ancillary space is the tire space, right? So I started doing that first. And I had, because I had know about that industry, what are the problems with that tire industry and everything. I actually, like, put that bias over there कि like, अरे ये tire industry है, तो ये भी ऐसा ही होगा. Like, I had generalized. Basically, मैं कहना चाहती हूँ, I had generalized this. Okay. And Nishat is like, bro, like, did you even read? I was like, okay, fine, let me read it. And this is when the first bias of mine I tried to counteract over here, right? Because one, Nishat is my friend. I didn't want to do a disservice to him. Second was, like, there has been a lot of times, where I have generalized things, where because I read something, calculating, I started using my head a lot, connected the dots, and this generalizing behavior is bad. X is bad, so Y is also bad. ठीक है, ये बुरा है तो इसका value chain ये है तो ये भी बुरा है, like that. So I didn't want to. So I picked it up in Q4 and I started reading about it, read the PPT, read the con call, and I told Nishad भाई तू क्यों खरीद रहा है? Like okay तू खरीद, but I will not buy it. आप खरीद लो, पर मैं तो नहीं खरीद रही हूँ, because they had given a guidance of 15 to 20% का growth engine. It was at that time. उसका valuation भी ठीक ठाक ही था. I think 1 year forward P. I don't remember the exact numbers. Okay, कि like 1 year forward P क्या था, because it's almost like more than a year ago. I think it was at that time like 15 से 20 ही था, like, and the growth engine was also like 20% का growth. Okay, and I was like, I'm not interested in buying it, because see, if I have to add a stock to the portfolio, if I have to add a new company, there are two things that has to happen. One, the existing any of the companies needs to fuck up for me to like churn the cash from here to there. That is one thing. Or the second thing would be the existing new opportunity that is there, it has to be much better than the current opportunities that are there in my portfolio. Opportunity ka cost ka bhi hai. At that time none of it was there. Like I had like 40-50% ka growth engine yahan pe, and also like it didn't make any sense to like replace that with Tinna Rubber. So maine bola ki like bhai main to nahi kar rahi hu, like I did. The other thing, after this what happened, Q1 ka result came, right? Like this is, I read it, I informed Nishad ki like what is my opinion about this, and I left it there. And but one thing about me, I would say one good thing, I do not know if it's a good or a bad thing, but is once I read about a company, then uske baad every time the result comes, I just continue to track it, because only the first time that you're reading it, you just have to have that focus, and after that like you know what to expect from that company, right? Like and when I saw the Q1 ka result, I was like, Nisha tumne result dekha hai, like kya gadiya kiya hai? Because I think the sales decrew, because one of their important thing, I think infra ka unka jo segment tha, that didn't perform as per expected. Yeah, orders didn't get executed and anything. At that time also I was like they didn't mention anything about guidance, there was nothing, so I was like, I let it go, okay? Nothing really happened. Okay, and then post that Q2 of FY24 came, right? And when Q2 of FY24 came, obviously like what I do is every during the result season, like now the result season will come, every day in the morning I go to BSc result calendar or NSC result calendar, I type and I see कि like आज कौन सा result आ रहा है, I take a note, make notes में डाल देती हूँ उसको, उसका सबका नाम I write, and then after that I go at the end of the day, I go and track like क्या किसने क्या किया, like this is how I know. So I believe this was in the month of October. I think I'm very sure it was in the month of October only, because I still remember this incident like very vividly, like it just happened yesterday or something. Okay, I had noted down and I knew कि like Tinna Rubber का result है, ठीक है, and I had informed Nishad. And then after that I just like, it was in the evening, I think I still remember, I think it was around evening time, and I just like, oh Nishad का company, let me just see, let me see what it's done, कि like anyways Q1 में तो टट्टी किया, let's see how Q2 is. I went and I opened Q2 and I was just really amazed, like they did 20% ka growth, it was good, operating leverage tha, volume growth was 40%, it was great. Then after that, after the result came, a few time later, a few minutes later, a few hours later, a couple of hours later, the PPT came. Okay, and when I saw, I was like scrolling the PPT, because the first few slides of the PPT are the same, explaining the business model. So I'm just scrolling it, and then there comes this one slide. I still remember it very clearly. Look, I just saw that slide, I was like, Vision 2027, they had given a guidance, okay, and they had mentioned like what they would do and everything, okay? And at that time I just saw it and I was like, they had mentioned like they want to reach 300 crores say 900 crores of revenue, the ROC would be touching somewhere between 30%, they would be growing their revenues at 25% CAGR, uska jo profitability hoga, it would grow at 33% CAGR, capex ka jo plant hai, it would go from 4 plants to 10 plants, uska jo capacity hai, it would go from 80,000 metric tons per annum to like 250,000 metric tons per annum, like almost a 4x in terms of capacity. I still remember this. I literally was on my laptop. I jumped out of my laptop, grabbed my phone, took a picture, and I just sent it to Nishat. And I was like, bro, did you even read the PPT? Like, did you just see that? And I was like, and at that time I told him like, see, now if you buy or don't, I don't care if you're increasing the allocation. Bhai, main to kal subah khood rahi hu usme, like, I'm going to do it, okay. Here also comes the second bias that I want to talk about. Like, I would say two biases, okay. One thing is, most of the times earlier what I used to do is, if I read a company once and then like acha nahi lag raha, I used to be like, okay, I should like let it go, okay. I should not have a habit of tracking it, And as a result, I also had this notion ki like, कि like एक जो company बुरा है, it will always continue to do bad result, and as a result, like I did also lose out on a lot of opportunities. So that is something that I learned कि like whether the result is bad or whether the result is good, you continue to track, because you do not know when that, that coin will change or when that coin will flip. Okay, so that habit of mine, where I continue to track even till today, like I track everything. Let's say if I'm doing FMCG, I track HUL to, Bector also, or Foods Indian, which is the smallest players over here, or Annapurna Swadish. I literally track the entire breadth irrespective of what it has done last quarter. Even QSR, right, itna ganda kar raha hai 2 saal se, but I still track it because you do not know. Only when you track, you'll get to know, when the situation changes. So if I hadn't tracked it, the last 2 quarters, and if I hadn't tracked it in Q2 also, I wouldn't have found out the opportunity. That is number one. The other thing over here is quick decision making. Okay, like there has been many times in my life where, I read, मैं पढ़ते ही जा रही हूँ, मैं पढ़ते ही जा रही हूँ, मैं, and also, you be like, अरे एक और क्वार्टर देखते हैं and I'll see what will happen, मैं उसके बाद I will buy. ऐसे करते करते वो स्टॉक तो वहां से 2x होके पी रेटिंग होके हो चुका होगा. And this is my experience with a company called Anup Engineering. So I played Ace, I played Anup Engineering, but with Anup Engineering, I do not know why. I was a bit hesitant, and I did take a bit more time, to invest or to act on that decision of mine. And by that time, I had acted a certain, like that stock had already, uska ek to P rating ho chuka tha. So, although I did play, it was also another like 2x for me. But having said that, no, I think it would have been maximized. It would have been more if, I actually worked on that, like when I got the opportunity, if I had actually deployed my money at that time and not waited for a quarter. So when this Tinna Rubber ko opportunity came, that, when I saw that Vision 2027 PPT me dekha, I was like, bro, like I'm not going to do that same mistake that I did with Anup Engineering, and I'm going to deploy it over here. Like I told you, the reason to invest, one was, you see that the growth ka jo hai, right, the guidance, they were very, like the management was very naive to give out the guidance, first of all. And for the first time, they had given the guidance, right, and they had given a clear cut plan, like, how they will achieve it, right. That was one thing, because they had mentioned about the capex. It was literally the investment checklist go in my head like tuck 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 tuck, like growth tha, profitability, operating leverage is going to kick in, right. At the same time, capex ho raha hai, right, they're increasing the capacity, production ho raha hai, volume growth aane wala hai, value growth aane wale hai. At the same time, kya ho raha hai, yahan pe P rating option tha, because it was, I believe, a 25% ka growth engine available at, I don't remember exactly what, but I think it was available at 21 or 25 ka forward P, yeah, somewhere around that range only. It wasn't too expensive also at that time. It was, I think, right below the, a little bit plus or 5 or 10, points, from the growth rate. It was at, I think it was same. The P and growth were at a similar rates where P rating was possible, right? And again, like I told you, at that time, two things had happened for me over here. One was existing one of the holdings had really screwed up. I do not remember which one it was again, but I don't remember which holding it was, but it was, again, it's very hard for me to remember. I don't know which it was, but at that time, that I felt really bad because that business screwed up. But at the same time, then I had that money to be deployed into Tinna Rubber. That's one thing. Now you can ask me about allocation, right? Like, because you can ask me like, Prerna, I understand guidance diya and everything, but how did you know कि like ये ऐसा ही करेगा? I didn't know. To be very honest, I didn't know, right? Whenever I talk about a guidance, right, I tell you, right, like it depends on the management's का execution. So at that time, it's not like, when I saw that Vision 2027, मैंने वहां पे कूद के सब कुछ डाल दिया, पूरा portfolio Tinna Rubber बना दिया. It didn't happen. I started with a 6.5% का allocation, if I'm not wrong, 6 to 6.5% का allocation totally in my portfolio towards Tinna Rubber. I had put it over there. After that, what happened? Slowly as the performance increased, I did, because koi bhi guidance de sakte hai, right, but it comes down to the execution over there. So again, like I told you, I didn't know if the management would execute it. It was a shot in the dark, like guidance diya, paisa dalte, but I didn't have a huge allocation at that time. ठीक है. So this was the entire story of buying, first of all, कि like मैंने कैसा buy किया यहाँ पे, ठीक है. Now obviously, now let's talk about the biases that kicks in slowly, during the entire holding period. Okay, मेरा तो है बदकिस्मत, luck is like that. After I buy, I think I started buying at that 440, 452 range. I started I bought, every time, like 482 में भी खरीदा. And after that क्या हुआ, once I bought it, the stock had fallen like, I think 10% down from my buy price or 15% down from the buy price. And obviously now that thing kicks in, no matter how much you read, right, sometimes that doubt creeps in you, right, like your mind plays tricks on you, कि like भाई खरीदा भी 15% नीचे गिरा है, right, am I making a wrong decision, am I making the right decision? decision, that I think there is a sense of fear also that kicks in, right? Because for me, in my portfolio, 6.5% is not a small money, right? It's like a make or break thing. And I was like, oh, like, like, am I doing the right decision? That did come up, that did creep up, I won't lie, right? It did creep up multiple times, but I was like, you know what, every time I used to see that, I used to see that, be below my buy price, the holding, and I should just look at the PPT and it should be like Vision 2027. Yeah, either they're going to do this or they're not going to do this, that's where it's going to come up. But anyways, after this Q2, Q3 ka, what do you tell that Q3 ka result was going to come, I kept holding on to the stock irrespective. In between this Q2 and Q3, or I think it was in Q3 itself, again, my time frame could be a bit wrong because it's not like I remember everything, to the T over here. At that time, what happened between Q2 and Q3, I believe there was this Red Sea crisis. I don't know why Red Sea crisis happened. I think it was because of a war. Maybe it was Russia-Ukraine war. I'm not sure. I think it is Russia-Ukraine war. Maybe because of that or so. But there was this Red Sea ka crisis hua tha, and as a result, all the export was affected. Steel ka bhav badne laga and everything. So obviously, inka bhi yahan pe raw material ka prices, because of logistics ka issues and everything, it was bound to increase. Okay, so there was this fear over here. Like obviously, एक fear रहता है, right? Because these are the things that affect the business. But having said that, you also don't know, because in market अगर आप देखते हो ना, there are three kinds of thing: unknown, known, unknown, like this. But here it is a, like, like, this is like whether it will affect, nahi affect hoga, you do not know. You know that there is an issue, right? And I didn't want to take a decision, based यहाँ पे कि like, I wanted to wait from the con call and PPT. मुझे देखना था कि like, कि like क्या होने वाला. I didn't want to use my head over here. But there was this fear कि like, भाई अगर ये actually, let's say, whatever this issue is, if it gets translated into numbers and they're not able to achieve the guidance, तो मेरा तो गया यहाँ पे, right? Like obviously. But luckily Q3 का result comes, they shoot it off the charts. I believe in that year they were supposed to clock 90 crore ka run rate every quarter, and they did more than that only. Operating leverage got kicked in, and the management was even more bullish in the next con call. They were like, yeah, we are going to do the guidance. शायद margins जो है इस साल में, it might not increase that much. But having said that, we are very sure we'll be able to pass on the cost, to our raw material price to the consumer. We've already spoken to them about it, everything. And that gave me like this huge confidence, and I deployed even more money. And I think that was the last tranche I deployed over there. After the Q3 ka numbers, I did deploy a lot more. By this time, I would say my average, because I had done a lot more buying it then, I think this time my average was somewhere around like 480 something, in that range it was. Okay, so that's how it was. So that's the last time, like I did continue to buy, because the management continued to execute on what they had promised over here. Okay, so this was the entire, I would say, story of buying. I think the last part I bought over here. Then the other thing over here, if you look at it, right, in I think the next quarter, in Q3, after Q3, if you see, it is Q4, right? In Q4 kya hua tha? Again, the same thing over here, like the guidance that was there, they had achieved, right? Unka guidance unhone kiya, operating leverage got kicked in again, everything was going great, everything was hunky-dory. But before Q4 ka result over here, right, I think by that time the stock had re-rated. Okay, I think it went from that 452, 482, it had reached like I think around 1300, 400, in that range. This was before the Q4 ka result. Like I think this was before Q4 ka result only. Yeah, as much as I remember, this was before Q4 ka result. Now Q4, I think in that month of June, right? In the month of June, what had happened? We had elections, right? We had that June 3rd or 4th, we had elections. And I don't know if you guys remember, right? There was this like volatility. We had like, I think 3-4 days or probably a week, where I think almost all the stocks, one day, I think on June 4th itself, almost all the stocks literally fell 10-15%. They were falling, right? And Tinna was no exception that day. Like that stock had fallen, I believe, from like 1300, 1400, say almost around like 1100, in that range, right? And now obviously, right, when you've seen a stock ka journey like almost from like 450 to like almost like without anything like to 1400, and एक ही झटके में back to back every day, like you've seen 30-40% like being wiped out of yours, or of you, it does create I wouldn't say panic, but it does create uncomfortable feeling. You start to doubt yourself and you think like, "Arey, like, because like companies like Tinna Rubber and everything, right? It depends on policies also. Like as much as you would like, we would like to, deny it, right? It does depend because you need the government का support because आधा तो आधा यहाँ पे road ही बना रहे हैं ना, मतलब infrastructure यहाँ पे road बना रहे हैं. So अगर नया government आते उसका plan scrape करते, this will be affected. So obviously that thing होता है, right? Elections का fear है. Other than that, I think there was also a terrible heat wave we had, right? So and for them already Q1 and Q2 are not that great months. Q3 and Q4 are the best quarters for them. So obviously here these were the little bit like doubts creeping in, like what to do. And again, like I didn't want to like fall into that entire speculation ka trap and everything, like because I don't believe in speculations. Like I always tell, right, whatever decisions I take, it will be based on the numbers, it will be based on the corporate documents that I read, right? So at this time when all of these incidents were happening, it was just it was really terrible to see the portfolio do that. Most people don't realize, they think like, "Arey, abhi bhi आप profit में हो," right? So why should it pain? But you also, it's not just about your holdings going into loss. That's one kind of pain. But the other kind of pain is when you've seen something like do like a lot well and it comes down from that price, there is also that amount of you also feel bad at that time also. I do not know how to explain it. That is also there. But I didn't do anything. I did feel sad. I did feel very sad, in fact, and there were a lot of doubts that crept in. But I was like, bhai, let me just close this thing. Like I'm not going to like take any decisions. It would be a very rash decision to take. In fact, there was one of my friend over here who did sell, like during that time, and I was like, bro, I'm not going to take that decision. Let me just see what happens. We will see, right? And then comes at that, and right during this time, heat waves happened, elections happened. At the same time, before this, I think Q4 में, wait, I don't remember the exact timeline, but हाँ, इसके बाद Q4 का result आया, बहुत अच्छा किया, everything was hunky dory. They literally whatever the guidance was given for that year did beautifully, ठीक है. उसके बाद आते, I think after this Q4 का result, there was a time where I think before Q4 or Q1, there was a time where a promoter sold little bit of their shares, okay. And obviously, right, for a lot of people this comes off as a negative thing, but I don't see promoter buying or selling as a negative, promoter selling as a negative thing. I mean, there are conditions obviously over here. See, I do not know why that person is selling. शायद उसको, like, see, at the end of the day, even for promoters, it is an equity, it is an asset. शायद उसको कुछ, शायद पैसा घर खरीदने के लिए, who knows? I don't know, you don't know. So I didn't want to like sell something just because कि like promoter बेच रहे तो मैं भी बेचूं. Who knows what his reason was, right? At the same time, there are times where I sell. Like for example, like let's say that issue what happened with Gensol. It would be foolish not to sell Gensol, with whatever happened at that time. वो बोल रहे हैं मैं sell नहीं करूंगा, फिर इतना सब घपला होता है market में, फिर वो आके sell करते. That is like a negative thing. So I would say again, I wouldn't want to generalize telling promoter selling is never bad or never good. But in this case or in this situation, when the promoter was selling, I just didn't, again, it wasn't like a part in my checklist, where it was like, a negative thing for me to sell. So I continued to hold on over here. And after this, I believe in Q1, I think right before Q1 ka result aane se pehle, I think the stock had almost reached, I do not remember if it was Q1 or Q2. Q1 का result आया, right, and they did again the highest ever quarterly revenue, 110 crores का clock किया था, not 110, I think it was 136 crore in that range, 130 crore odd. Profits भी अच्छा था, operating leverage भी था, and everything. Now comes, I think in Q1 at that time, they had done really well. I think by now the stock had, this was right before Q1, the stock had, I think, reached around that 2000, 1900, 2000 ka level, right? And now obviously when it reaches this level, right, it is, I think now like more than 4x in my portfolio right now. And this another doubt creeps up. I would say like bias number 4, okay, like, is this the peak? Should I sell it, right? And if that were the case, like, I don't think anybody can, understand, or know or predict कि like यही peak है. This reminds me of that quote from Charlie Munger जो आता है, right? Like nobody can predict a peak, and the bottom of a stock, and the only person who can do it is one liar, and the second is God, right? So obviously when the stock reached over here, I did get a lot of queries, like I had a couple of friends of mine called Prabal and Aman, they were like, bro, like, should we sell it and everything? And I was like, bhai, देख, decision लिया था यहाँ पे, the reasons to buy it, right? Reasons क्या था buy करने के लिए? ये grow करेगा 300 से 900 करोड़ करेगा, 25% का CAGR लाएगा हमारे लिए, पेस ऑफ ग्रोथ शुड बी इन दैट रेंज, दैट इज नंबर वन. सेकंड, अगर आप देखते हो ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज हमें होना चाहिए, दैट शुड बी देयर. थर्ड, अगर आप देखते हो राइट, वी ऑल द केपेक्स का प्लान जो हो रहा है, इट शुड गो वेल ओनली. 4 प्लांट से 10 प्लांट बनाना, जो मेट्रिक टन्स पर एनम है, यू नो दे हैव टू इंक्रीज. दे हैड गिवन अ गाइडेंस आल्सो कि लाइक 80,000 मेट्रिक से हम लोग 2.5 लाख मेट्रिक टन्स तक जाएंगे, एंड हम every year we'll be adding so and so year. So by the time FY27 reaches, we will reach that 2.5 lakh metric ton. So I was like, देखो ये हमारे इन्वेस्टमेंट थीसिस है. one or multiple points in this investment thesis has to go wrong for me to sell it, right? Not ये कि like ये करेंगे कि like ये top हो गया sell. Because why am I telling this is because I used to have a holding called Force Motors, ठीक है. I had bought it, I think, and then it had reached a price of like I think around 5,400 in that range, and I sold it क्योंकि मुझे क्या लगा, अरे यही तो top है, right? Like this is the maximum, this is the top, इससे क्या ही होगा, right? And भाई, I sold that thing and that stock literally went after that, to like 10,000, 11,000, in that range it went. So that is a mistake that I didn't want to do. I didn't want to use my head over here and be like, valuation expensive है, and this is the top, because this is something that you can't. At the end of the day, as long as the company continues to perform, you will make money, right? And I didn't want to do that mistake that I did with Force Motors over there. So I was like, okay, I'm not going to sell. Now Q1 ka result comes, like I told you, it has like, right when you look at the result now, it was well and good, like everything was great, everything was fantastic, ठीक है. मतलब अगर आप क्या बोलते हैं, sales top line देखो 136 करोड़ बोला था, because in this year they have to clock a revenue of 500 crore total, and every quarter they targeted a revenue of 110 crore odds, that is what they wanted to do. And भाई उन्होंने किया था 136 करोड़, so which is literally guidance से ज्यादा ही किया था, right? And leverage and everything. But when I dig deep, right, like जब मैं con call पढ़ी and everything, and I dig deep, now it also, see, it's also very important here to understand कि like आप जब result देखते हो, it is one picture, but when you read con call ना, the picture becomes even more clear. con call से ये पता चला कि like ये जो operating leverage है, ये bottom line जो है ना, a part of it, the reason you're able to see this huge change in bottom line over here is because उनका एक EPR का credits जो है, that started adding on over here, ठीक है, and that started coming into the stock, that stock बोल रही, that started coming into the bottom line. So that was a huge push for operating leverage over here, ठीक है. And along with that, I think by that time this Israel Hamas का war had started, थोड़ा सा problem आने लगा, like it hadn't started then, but there was that headwind, there could be a possibility of headwinds coming because of this. But I didn't like, at that time, again, see, by that time, I think when this had reached, right, I think it had become like, I think almost more than 15% of my allocation, this entire stock had become. So for me, when this, always there is a possibility of a headwind coming. Headwind आया नहीं, एक possibility आया था, एक clue मिला था वहाँ पे con call में, probably, ये शायद अगर if this war prolongs, ये export में affect हो सकता है, because the entire crisis आ जाएगा ना आपका shipment में, logistic issues बढ़ जाएगा and everything, right? So this, and at that time I was like, bro, let me panic. I have a very simple policy. I think matlab me and Rajushi over here, we have a very simple policy ki like, I would rather panic early than panic late. Okay, so this is one thing that one thing we have in our investment journey. And I was like, bro, wait, let me just, but I also didn't want to like completely like cut off, like there is a possibility of headwind. मैंने 20% का जो वो होल्डिंग का वैल्यू था, 20 to 25% ऑफ द होल्डिंग का वैल्यू, आई हैड सोल्ड इट, ठीक है. मैंने बोला ठीक है, छोड़ो, इतना बड़ा भी एलोकेशन हो चुका है अभी, आई डोंट वांट टू टेक लाइक इतना भी रिस्क नहीं है. एट द सेम टाइम प्रॉबेबली यहाँ पे शायद दिस whatever the problem they told, it might never happen also, and they will continue to execute, right? I didn't want to have regret in both ends, because regret is the worst thing that you can have in the market, right? I mean, there is no way around it. So I was like, ठीक है, थोड़ा सा allocation कम करते हैं यहाँ पे, because ultimately even if I reduce my allocation by 20-30%, I still have a huge chunk. अगर यहाँ से भी वो double होता है, I can I still make a lot more money. It is still okay. So I took like 20-25% का मैंने अपना value निकाला था at that time after the Q1 का result, ठीक है. And next comes, after that it comes, ठीक है, सब कुछ था, the stock started, by then it had started falling also, I believe, but and then Q2 का result आया, ठीक है, मतलब Q2 of this year का result आया, and it was worse than Q1, although the top line was there, ठीक है, top line grew very very fantastically, top line grew by 117%, 117 crore का top line था, run rate was 110 crores यहाँ पे, so they had done exactly, and this in spite of Q2, because Q2 is the worst, आप बोल सकते हो lean quarter है, ठीक है. In spite of it, they had done well, but question comes here bottom line में ना, because EPS का growth, see for any stock to do make money you need three things. One is pace of growth होना चाहिए, EPS का growth, operating leverage मिलना चाहिए आपको, और आपको PE का re-rating भी मिलना चाहिए at the end of the day. यहाँ पे operating leverage का तो एक you know what happened, they started missing out on that because most of the money was coming from EPR credits, right, not from the business operation. Business operation में थोड़ा problem आ चुका था because of that Israel-Hamas का war, you know, margins were starting to get affected over here. So I was like in Q2, like I told you, right, Q1 mein I gave a chance. Like you people keep asking me, right, like when the pace of growth slows down, when the operating leverage goes off in a stock, do you sell all of it at once? It's a case to case scenario, right? There are certain times, you know, where let's say guidance data hai and they miss by a guidance by a huge mark or you know something, that time it's a big no no for me. I literally sell it the next quarter, next minute only. I just don't care. But here do you see, even I was actually in like a juxtaposition over here because Q1 का अगर आप रिजल्ट देखते हो, very well numbers में कोई प्रॉब्लम नहीं था, जो बोला था अचीव भी किया था, बट ऑपरेटिंग लेवरेज में थोड़ा प्रॉब्लम था, राइट, दैट वाज देयर एंड आई कुडंट इग्नोर दैट पार्ट. इसलिए मैंने क्या किया, 20 to 25% का एलोकेशन हटाया वहां से, यू नो द वैल्यू आई टुक आउट ऑफ इट, बट आई स्टिल प्लेड बिकॉज इट कुड गो आइदर वेज, प्रॉब्ली वो प्रॉब्लम ही नहीं आए. एंड let's say if the problem comes, then you know I can still continue to decrease. Q2 mein jab this problem came, right, like array, like operating leverage ka, like you know again it was not that great, it was missing operating leverage and everything, and you know most of it came from this EPR ka credits and all. I was like, bro, I gave one quarter ka chance, second quarter mein nahi de sakti hu. I literally took maximum. I think by now I had taken almost like 80 to 85, I think 90% ka maine holdings hata diya yahan pe after Q2, theek hai. I think at this time the stock was ranging somewhere between, the first time I sold it, it was somewhere between 1700 1800. The second time I did it, it was I think 15ish 15 1600, I don't remember exactly, but in that range, somewhere between 1400 to 1600, in that range it was. I think 1500 to be precise, somewhere in that range, around 1500 I had sold it, and I was like, bro, enough is enough. But then I still had, like I told you, right, it is you buy in tranches and you start selling in tranches over here. And then Q3 ka result came, and Q3 of this quarter ka result came, and I was like, all hell broke loose, because this was the first time where you know the profits had degrown from the last year, or you know that had happened, and that is like a big no no यहाँ पे. EPS अब तक तो थोड़ा operating leverage नहीं मिल रहा था, like there was growth, the profits were growing, but not at that very fast pace that you were seeing earlier. अभी तो profits degrew होने लगा, and I was like, big no no यहाँ पे. Sold everything, the 10% of the value that was there, I sold everything in Q3 over there and got out of it. So this was the entire journey. Can you see buying का, holding का and selling का कैसा strategy था यहाँ पे. And one thing that you observe over here, the entire time, whether when I bought it between Q2 Q3 of that FY24 or versus when I was selling over here between Q2 and Q3 of this FY25, right, I didn't do any decision. I didn't tell ki like you know, when I bought the stock, मैंने ये नहीं बोला था कि like you know, I didn't decide कि like you know, I will hold the stock for 3 years, I will hold the stock for 5 years, right. I didn't decide the holding period, I didn't decide the allocation. It is the company's का performance that decided my holding period and decided my allocation over here. जब तक it was a very good contender, जब तक you know उसका growth rate था, उसका you know valuation भी ठीक ठाक था, जहाँ तक मुझे PE rating मिल रहा था, I continue to buy it, right. I continue, जब तक उसका performance था, I continue to buy it, I continue to hold it also. जब but उस दिन when इसका performance that was there, it you know it started deteriorating, what did I do? I started selling it, right. So do you see both the things, whether it comes to holding, whether it comes to allocating it, I didn't decide. It is a company's का performance you know that decide. यहाँ पे काटने का, जोड़ने का, you know the entire thing, कैसे मैं जोड़ूं, the entire time while I was buying the stock, it was decided by the company's performance. When I decided to cut the stock, जब मैं काटने का कोशिश कर रही थी, तब भी उस company का performance ने decide किया, I didn't decide it, right. So you see over here, I neither like bought it in the bottom over here, like when I first came across this opportunity, because I see some people, they were, you know, they're like, they bought it at like 100 rupees and 110 rupees. I just don't understand what was the logic behind buying that. I didn't buy it at the bottom, neither did I sell it at the top. I think one thing that you can see from my entire video, right? मैंने उसको like bottom में भी नहीं खरीदा 100 रुपए में. I bought it somewhere in the between where it made sense to me. At the same time, मैंने peak में भी 2200 में भी मैंने sell नहीं किया. It is just not possible only, let me tell you. You and I, nobody can decide it. You just have to be extremely lucky over here, I would say, you know. to do that, right? So this has literally been my journey, and this is my journey, I would say, most of the time. I would say, I wouldn't say journey, but this is a process that I follow most of the time in any stock that I hold, whether it is coming to buying, holding, and selling, right? There are many times, your patience is going to be tested, your thesis is going to be tested. No matter how much you read, your doubt is going to creep up. But overall, you need to have like a very strong, like why do I keep telling you guys to read PPT, read con call over and over again? Because of the same thing. You won't build a conviction over here without, without reading, without practicing over here. And yahan pe, right, and I'm just grateful for all the mistakes that I did, because the first time I sold it was around like 1600, 1700 in that range, I think 1800 in that range. Second time was around 1500ish range, 1550 in that range. The third, the last in this Q3 when I sold it, it was around 1100, right? So do you see, it became, the entire logic over here, the entire thing is to maximize your profit and minimize your loss at the end of the day. That's the advice, or I would say that's the philosophy that we have when we come to investing. To buy quickly, at the same time, cut loose also very quickly. So that is the thing I would say. So it's been a great journey with Tinna Rubber, honestly. And I, as much as I would like to take the credit and be like, for whatever this stock has done, it's been a good game changer. There are this actually, this stock is, I would say, this um what is that, Tinna Rubber, Ace, Anup also to a certain extent, and I think there are two more holdings that I have, which I can't talk about because I still have it in my portfolio. There are these five names, that's very special to me, is because whenever I do my investment decisions, like I bounce it off with Rajoshi, right? Like I do, and these are the five names I can tell you, right, where it's been my idea, it's been my stock, and I had to like convince him to buy it, and he never bought it. So like it's sometimes like going against him, and buying that, and it being very successful, so that has a separate kick to it, I would say. So that is one thing. But overall, more than anything else, right, this entire thing, whatever, it's been a 4x 5x, whatever the hell it is. But I would say, right, most of the times we think, it is me, me, myself, me, my work, right? That is what we think. But having said that, yahan pe, I don't think it's me, myself. There has been a lot of things that has come together for me to be able to experience this journey with the stock, right? Like, first of all, like I would say, like, obviously thanks to Rajoshi, because if he hadn't, like, when I started this investment journey, if he hadn't believed in me in the first place, and been like, you can do this, you have a knack for it, I wouldn't be here making videos in front of you guys. Like, it wouldn't have been possible, right? So that's one thing. The second is, I would say, like, Nishat, because if he hadn't come across that opportunity 2 quarters ago, right, I wouldn't even have probably, he tracked the company, right? Since he spoke about this company, I tracked the company after that, right? Then it so I owe huge thanks to him. And third, I would say the most important is Tinna management ka, Tinna Rubber ka management, because if they didn't execute, I wouldn't even be holding the stock, right? Like, I mean, I wouldn't even be playing that thing. It is because they executed. Someone like me sitting here in Bangalore has been making money over here. So it's a very, I think you call it a butterfly effect, right? It's similar to that. So that's been my journey with this Tinna Rubber and Infrastructure. I hope I'm able to get many such opportunities. I think, if you guys, I think you can also watch my video on Tinna Rubber the first time I discussed it. I think it's there in YouTube, because I remember this, because at that time, right, when I started making videos, I used to not make videos dynamically. I used to wait for PPT, I used to wait for con call. उसके बाद, like I should take my own gala time, to make investment decisions मैं तो करती थी, but video बनाने के लिए, I used to take a lot of time. Like right now तो अभी आदत बन चुका है. I can sit in the camera, in front of the camera, and talk. But at that time, I was still not comfortable, right? So I think I made that video. I still remember. I think it was December. I was in Mangalore at that time. The worst possible time, because Christmas is the one festival we celebrate, and I had it terrible. I had a fever that day, and I made a video on Tinna Rubber. I think there is this Christmas tree in the background. I was in my uncle's house, and I made that video. That was the first time I spoke about Tinna Rubber, probably in my channel. And then I've been like tracking that company and showing you guys. So see, ultimately it comes down to one thing. You can you need to track a company. This is why I keep telling you all again and again and again and again, okay, like track the company, the good or bad or ugly, track it. Because when I started tracking Tinna Rubber first, it was not a great opportunity, but since I tracked it, when the opportunity came, I was able to recognize it. Similarly, just because I tracked the company every quarter, when the situation arose, when the problem arose, right, I was able to also sell it off, at the right times and get out of it too. So that is the thing. Yeah, that's it about my journey with Tinna Rubber and Infrastructure. I hope this entire thing adds value to you guys. And yeah, that's that. Have a great day. Bye.